Hi everybody, I'm Jamie. Thank you for tuning in. I always like to recap last week's games at a glance and biggest stories in football, discuss some waiver wire pickups, and wrap things up with some pigskin pick'ems and DFS plays. So let's dive in to week 11. Ironically, I'm wearing my Julio Jones jersey. That was an accident, but I intended to show the Falcons some love after a much-needed moral victory against the Saints this weekend. I want to start out by talking through some of the biggest surprises for me this weekend. At the top of the list, I got to say the Titans beating the Chiefs. Titans are working their way into the conversation for the wild card spot, sneakily. But one that the Chiefs really should have won on paper. You got Mahomes coming back, putting some points on the board, but a tough loss for them. They're unfortunately working their way out of the divisional conversation if they're not careful. They've got the Oakland Raiders right on their tail that have a very winnable game this weekend against the Bengals. Chiefs have a tough one against the Chargers, who are at home, so not a gimme for them, but definitely not the Chiefs team that we've seen in the past. They've got some things to tighten up if they really want to make a play, throughout the playoffs here. Another interesting one for me was the Dolphins beating the Colts. Yes, I get it. Jacoby Brissett's out, T.Y. Hilton's out, but I really thought Brian Hoyer would still give him a chance. But Dolphins have actually been getting into a little bit of a rhythm. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, gives him a good option to at least be in the game. You got Devontae Parker, who's been coming on strongly. And, Dolphins look better. They might want to pump the brakes if they want a good draft pick, but nonetheless, showing that they, can beat a decent team, I think. Some things that didn't surprise me were the Falcons beating the Saints. I've said all year that the Falcons are a dangerous team, not one that I would want to play if I was rolling along doing well. I was surprised by how few points the Saints put on the board. This was not Drew Brees' first game back, so interesting that, it wasn't quite as close of a game as I thought it would be. But better to lose this game for them now than later. Another game that I wasn't surprised by was the Seahawks beating the 49ers. Seahawks have been looking great this year, and I will say the 49ers looked like a different team without Emmanuel Sanders out there. Obviously they didn't have George Kittle off the bat. Those two will be back soon, so I think they'll bounce back. Their defense looks amazing. One that really could have gone either way. I don't think that you can be too displeased when you got a kicker off the street, at least keeping you in the game. But nonetheless, wasn't surprised that was such a good game, which it was an amazing game. Wasn't surprised by the Panthers losing to the Green Bay Packers, although I thought they would really give them a good game. They did. One that came down to the wire. One the Panthers really needed to win if they did want to make a play at that wild card spot in the NFC. But the Seahawks and Vikings running away with it at this point. Vikings looked good. Fun fact, I actually went to the game. It was almost like a home game for the Vikings. It was crazy. Game was in Dallas. I strongly recommend going to AT&T Stadium if you ever get the chance. Super fun. Texas Live is a blast, but it was a sea of purple in there. It was nuts. And Kirk Cousins put on a show, and you have Kyle Rudolph looking like his old self. I've been a little bit displeased with how much he's been underperforming. Thought he'd be a stronger presence in that offense, but he's been stepping up in Adam Thielen's absence, so somebody to consider. We'll get to him when we talk through some waiver wire pickups. So let's get to some of those. I want to start out with some wide receivers. All the pickups that I have, they're meant to be a little bit more long-term. I don't like just plug-and-play players for 1 week. I do like somebody I can keep on my bench if I have injuries. I will discuss a couple people that you can if you just have somebody that's out for a week or a bye. Number one on my list, I'm going to mention him just in case he's still available in your league, and that's Devontae Parker. He's 59% owned at this point. He had 10 targets, 5 for 69 yards. He's been consistent. He's gelling well with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Preston Williams is out for the year, so he's going to continue to get those looks. He's definitely an experienced wide receiver that's carried the load before, and I think he's going to continue to get those targets. Next on the list, Demaryius Thomas, again a veteran. He's been clicking very well with Sam Darnold, and we've seen some strong consistency in the last 4 weeks, ever since they signed him on, or shortly after they signed him on. Another one, I've been saying this one, Cole Beasley. He's been consistent. If you need somebody, obviously these are not players you're probably going to be playing each week, but you might have to. Cole Beasley, 4 for 6, 74 yards. Didn't even get into the end zone, but was, relevant. Another one with some very strong upside, he's still available in some leagues, is Will Fuller, 55% owned. He's worth a look. Before he got hurt, 9 targets and then 16 targets in his last 2 games, and he had that one game with I think it was 3 touchdowns. He had 54 points, whatever it was. It was crazy good. But he's obviously somebody who gets a lot of red zone targets, and has some strong upside. He hadn't always gotten the volume, but he had been getting it right before he got hurt. So, definitely somebody to give a look to if you need a wide receiver. Another two that people are really going crazy for, Deebo Samuel and Darius Slayton. So here's what I will say about these two. Deebo Samuel, even with Emmanuel Sanders in the lineup last week, he did have 7 targets. He had 11 last week. So depending on whether Emmanuel Sanders plays or not, and whether George Kittle works his way back into the lineup, somebody to consider. I would definitely consider him in like a DraftKings play, but maybe not your long-term option. Darius Slayton, somebody who actually really has been looking, I think, like a more likable option. Sterling Shepard could come back, but with how long he's been out with it being a concussion, that's very concerning. So shows me that they might continue to stick with him, or at least, slowly work in Sterling Shepard, but he has been performing very well. Done 2 touchdowns this past weekend, so somebody to strongly consider, especially if you just need somebody for a week or two. At the running back position, a little bit more slim pickings, not people I feel great starting. Somebody that I feel decent about in a PPR league is J.D. McKissic. He's 21% owned. His carries went up this past week. He's been looking a lot better than Ty Johnson. He had 7 targets, so he's definitely getting a little bit more of the workload there. Another person, now obviously we don't have much of a sample size to go off of, is Chris Thompson. So a lot of people like Darius Juice as an option coming back from injury. We'll see how that works. I just think there's going to be a little bit of a workload share with he and Adrian Peterson. Now, obviously, Darius Juice is probably going to get more targets than AP, but I think Chris Thompson is going to be a strong threat when it comes to targets. So if you have PPR in your league, if you do that thing, feel free to consider Chris Thompson. I like him. I've always liked Chris Thompson. I think he's a grinder, and he's honestly working for his job. He's even said it vocally that he doesn't know what his future looks like in the NFL. With Jay Gruden not as the coach anymore. So Jay Gruden liked him, but he's probably going to be fighting to at least show that he's relevant. Somebody to consider. Brian Hill, obviously somebody that is a popular pick right now. He's 7% owned. He had 20 attempts, looked good with Devontae Freeman exiting, 2 targets. Ito Smith did go on IR, so even before Devontae Freeman's been banged up, well, kind of while, I guess, but before Ito Smith went on IR, he was getting some decent targets and workload, in tandem with Devontae Freeman, who has really not been what we would expect. And now that he's banged up, Brian Hill could be a good option. Probably more of a short-term one, but could grow into a little bit more, as things progress. Quarterback, I like Nick Foles, the former MVP. I love Nick Foles. What can I say? I think he's got some strong upside. He can air it out. Also, have liked Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's had 2 touchdowns, either 2 touchdowns or more, in the last 4 games he's had either on the ground or throwing. So he's 11% owned. They're going to be down. He's going to be airing it out. Yes, he might get you a couple interceptions, maybe a fumble in there, but he's putting points on the board and he's been mildly consistent. The tight end position, number 1 on everyone's list has got to be Jacob Hollister. Not owned in many leagues. I think he's 7% owned, but he's had 16 targets and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He and Russell Wilson are definitely clicking, and even with Josh Gordon in there, he still looked like a very, very targeted player for him. Obviously, that could change as Josh Gordon settles in, but he's been looking great. Luke Wilson is falling off the face of the earth. Not that he was anything great to begin with, but sorry, Luke. Next on my list is Kyle Rudolph. Of course, he's 35% owned in leagues. He's been looking better. Obviously, he's been doing better in Adam Thielen's absence, but could continue, get into a better rhythm. Tyler Eifert, another one, 8% owned. You got Ryan Finley throwing on the ball, so that's concerning. But I think new quarterbacks that are settling in tend to lean heavily on their running backs and tight ends. So somebody to consider if you need somebody. And defensively, I like Oakland versus Cincinnati. They're 6% owned, and Ryan Finley turned the ball over 2 times in his debut. I like the Jets versus Washington. They're 23% owned. So let's dive into some pick'ems for this week's games. I like the Steelers against the Browns, who are at home. I like the Cowboys beating the Detroit Lions at home. If Matt Stafford plays, I think that can make things interesting, but I think the Cowboys have got him. I got the Colts beating the Jags at home. It's a must-win for the Colts. If Jacoby Brissett wins or plays, I think they have a better chance to win. I've got the Bills beating the Dolphins, who are at home. I've got the Vikings winning at home against the Broncos. I've got the Saints beating the Bucks, who are at home. I've got the Jets beating the Redskins. So going against the grain there, but I think that'll be a good game. I think Sammy D has got them. I'm going to go with the Falcons against the Panthers. So definitely going against the grain there. But I think the Falcons are coming off a big win. They look better. Matt Ryan's healthy. I've got the Falcons against the Panthers who are at home. I got the Ravens beating the Texans at home. That's going to be a really great game, though. I think that's one of the ones I'm most excited to see. I've got the Niners beating the Cardinals. I've got the Bengals pulling an upset against the Raiders. I don't know. Sooner or later, they got to win a game, right? I don't know. And the Raiders, I just don't know if they put many points on the board. So if there's one to win, I think they could beat them. I don't know. We'll see. I've got the Pats against the Eagles who are at home. That's a no-brainer. I've got the Rams beating the Chicago Bears. The Rams are at home. I think that's actually going to be a good game, though. I've got the Chargers beating the Chiefs at home. That one's against the grain there. Chiefs definitely should win that game, but I think the Chargers are another team that are dangerous. When it comes to DraftKings this week, I'm pairing up Drew Brees with Michael Thomas. Drew Brees 6,900, Michael Thomas 9,900, but I'm paying for him. He's been consistent all year, and he's been one of the best players in all the league. I've also got Tom Brady at 6,400, and Julian Edelman has been very consistent, very steady all year long. And if I'm going on the lower end of the spectrum, I'm going Ryan Fitzpatrick and Devontae Parker. Ryan Fitzpatrick's 5,100 and Devontae Parker's 4,700. So I like that combo. Wide receiver-wise, here's my thing. I think there's a lot of wide receivers who have some strong upside that are a little bit on the lower end of the spectrum. So if you're looking to balance out your lineup, I like Tyrell Williams at 5,400. He's been silent the past couple games. I also like Jamison Crowder. I've liked him all year long. He's kind of been going in waves, but I think he's definitely hitting his stride. Dangerous for sure at 5,700. And then I went dumpster diving, and I found Demaryius Thomas at 3,900, which I think is a steal. I also like Keelan Cole as a long shot at 3,800. Obviously a long shot. We don't know, really what the dynamic's going to look like with Nick Foles, but I think that there's some strong upside for him. Running back wise, I like Josh Jacobs a lot. Good matchup for him against the Bengals. He's 6,900, which I think is very low for him, especially with how consistent he's been. I also like Marlon Mack. He's had one touchdown in the last 7 days. That wouldn't be that bad. 7 games, he had one touchdown. So I think he's due for one. He's 6,400. Colts have a big one against the Jags. Not a great matchup, I guess, but I still think that he could do well. I also like Brian Hill, 4,800 for the Falcons. He looked good, and his last debut. And I also like Sony Michel. So Sony Michel's only 4,900. He's been very silent the past couple games, and he has this weird way of just killing it, one random game or so. And I've noticed, when they're up, he tends to get a lot more carries. Against the Ravens, he did not get quite as many, obviously, since they were down. But I do like Sony Michel. He's not as much of a target threat. They got James White and, Rex Burkhead's healthy now, but I think he could have a decent game. I also like, at the tight end position, Darren Waller, 5,500. Zach Ertz is only $5,000, which is crazy. He's been kind of silent, but had a really, really solid game in his last one. I like Greg Olsen. He had a good game this past weekend, 3,900. Darren Fells at 3,800 has been decent. Defensively, it's hard not to go with the Niners against Arizona at $4,000. On the lower end of the spectrum, mid-range, I like Oakland against Cincinnati at 3,300. And if we're going dumpster diving on defenses, hey, I'd take a shot on the Lions versus Dallas. Why not? Anyway, that's just a recap, for this next upcoming week here. Hope everything's going well in your fantasy football leagues. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at @fantasy_more. Good luck this week, and tune into next week's.